Jason Knight, if you don't know him, is a B2B product leader, consultant, coach, founder, and podcaster. And by day, he works with B2B startups and scale-ups to help them build great products and build the teams that build great products. By night, he speaks to inspiring thought leaders, practitioners, and founders on his podcast, One Night in Product, which I'm sure you all subscribe to or listen to. If you don't, please go join and check that out. And he can also, of course, be found posting tons of product memes online, which he's very famous for as well. So with that, Jason, over to you, and let's get things started.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm delighted to be opening the conference. And as once a friend of mine who was on stage said, if I fancy going and get a sandwich now, then I could delay the whole conference. But I'm not going to. I know there's some fabulous speakers on today, and I'm either going to start us all off with a bang or make everyone, or set a really low bar for everyone else to jump over. So we'll see where that gets to by the end of the next sort of 25 minutes or so. But hopefully it'll be a good one. And I'm going to start by talking about the eye roll. Now, the eye roll. Now, what's the eye roll? Well, this is either an actual eye roll, maybe accompanied by tutting or a raised eyebrow or brief pause or a disappointed look, or it could be slumped shoulders or just generic kind of, just a sense of general je ne sais quoi. But basically, if you've worked for any amount of time in any kind of product role, you've definitely experienced the eye roll. Now, the eye roll happens when you, the brave and intrepid product manager, have to tell someone that they're not getting what they want. Like maybe they don't get that special feature request, or that bug that keeps not getting fixed is still not getting fixed, or the release has been delayed yet again, or there's a problem with the roadmap, or you've released stuff and no one's using it. There are many, many reasons for the eye roll. But we kind of come away from it left with the suspicion that the person that you're talking to is sitting there saying, "Oh, bloody product management team, failing us again, never doing anything right." And in the worst cases, they'll actually say that to you. Of course, hopefully not, but even if they're not saying it to your face, you can always see them thinking it. And, that's kind of disappointing, because it makes us feel like people think that we're not making progress. Now, of course, in some cases we're not, but we also have to call out that in some cases we are, but people just don't know. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why people think we're not making progress, then talk about some of the problems that we have making progress and how we might try and fix those problems, and then a little bit about, well, how can we demonstrate that progress to other people? But, let's start from the beginning and ask ourselves, well, why don't people think that we're making progress? Well, a big part of this is kind of natural. Startups are stressful, we're all under pressure. No one's got an easy job in a startup, scale up, or to be honest, in any size of company. All jobs pretty much are hard. Very few people have easy jobs. But I do believe there is an intense ambiguity. We all probably feel this in the kind of the idea of like, well, what is the actual role of a product team? And now the role of a product team, like there's no standard definition. It obviously varies between B2B, B2C, B2B2C, B2B to whatever, product-led growth to sales-led growth, feature factories to outcome-led nirvanas, different market segments that we're attacking and different conditions that we have to deal with. But it does still leave this ambiguity and this kind of question about, well, what do product managers even do? Are they message carriers? Are they just glorified project managers? Are they maybe even that mythical CEO of product? And this is something that's not just a function of your company, but also of every single bias from every single person that's ever worked in any kind of company, all added up into one. But we could chalk that up to ignorance. We could just sit there and say, well, these silly salespeople or those silly leaders, they just don't know about the awesome power of product management, and they don't appreciate our moral and intellectual superiority and the fact that we're always right about everything. We could think, I don't think we should say that, but we could. And in fact, I've seen some people do. I think it's better to chalk it up to the iceberg effect. And that's the fact that people only see a little bit about what we do, and they assume that it's all of what we do. And that's something that, of course, with a very cross-functional role like product management, comes up all the time. But I'm not going to let product managers off here. Like we have the same with other roles as well. Like, how much do we know about the day-to-day lives of salespeople or the CS team, or even developers really, once they're outside of the stand-up? And how much do we know about what the leaders are doing? No one knows what everyone's doing all the time. They just know what they see, but they think it's about everything that they do. And we need to help people understand our entire job and the decisions that we're making day to day. And we need to help to translate that into progress and forward movement and kind of demonstrate the progress that we're making. Now, I speak to a lot of product people, again, as Scott kindly mentioned on the podcast, which you can listen to once this conference is all done. I don't want you splitting your loyalties there. But after that, but also through coaching product managers, product leaders, through consulting with SaaS companies, through some of the mentoring that I do, and just generally through the general kind of being a pain on social media and just getting involved in discussions with people all the time. I talk to a lot of PMs, and there does appear to be a general feeling of frustration that PMs feel that their impact is somewhat unknown or unquantifiable. And, you know, these PMs are sitting there with all of their latest frameworks and best practices, and they've read all the latest books and they think they've got it. But whenever they try and put it into practice or into reality or demonstrate results, they kind of come up short against a skeptical management team. So I asked this question recently on Twitter that, well, if you're a PM, if you had to, how would you measure the value of the product management team? And I got a variety of different answers talking about different ways of like subtracting certain types of prioritization from others, or conversion credit, whatever that is, of what the things are being shipped. Bing AI came up with some ridiculous formula that looks like I don't know what that looks like, but ultimately comes up with a big number. And even one person who came up and said, well, we shouldn't even be asking this question in the first place. It's a failure of an exec leadership if we even ask this question. Now, I'm not going to criticize any of these answers, but I am going to say that almost none of them that were answered to this question, I would feel confident going to a non-product leader and saying, oh, this is the value of product management. So the quest goes on. Because these product leaders, and we all know it, they haven't really read the books. They probably never will. In some cases, they kind of distrust the very concept of these books as kind of elitist ivory tower thinking. And we're absolutely not going to win these people over with book thinking. But we do need to demonstrate the value of what we do. And we do need to demonstrate progress, and we do need to demonstrate that we're moving forward in some direction towards some result. Because if we don't move forward, then what tends to happen is that the nearest hippo will get frustrated with the lack of perceived process, and they'll just try and move us forward for us. And if I know anything about product managers, we don't like being moved forward by anyone. We love to move forward, but we don't like to be moved forward by other people. So there's a constant challenge for product managers to demonstrate that forward movement, but not in a kind of a feature factory, just always be executing way. We need to be able to show that we're moving forward. Now, some of the challenges I talk about today are going to be things that I've seen in my career personally. Some of them are going to be things that I've seen through other people's careers or just general community engagement. There's a big mixture of challenges that we might come across in day-to-day product management. Some of them are intrinsic, sort of the stuff that we do to ourselves, and some of them are extrinsic. So, you know, the stuff that the weight of the company pushes down on us and kind of prevents us making progress, you know, outside of our own control, or so we think. But we do have to get one thing straight. Like, we're not going to blame anyone, ourselves or other people, for these challenges. Like, challenges exist, and they generally exist for good reasons. We don't want to blame anyone, but we do have to call out that there can be a bit of divergence between different parts of the company as to what they think progress even is. And we can't be demonstrating progress if we don't know what progress means. So one exercise that I like to do going into companies is, to try and work out how aligned they are, is do the kind of top to bottom exercise. So what's the top to bottom exercise, and what does it mean? Well, I want to know what progress or success, or, to some extent even the strategy of a company is. And I'm well aware that if you go to the top of the tree, the CEO, let's say, or the bottom, whoever's at the bottom, if we want to stick to tired old Taylorist hierarchies, we accept that there's kind of a continuum of people from the very top to the very bottom of the knowledge and the power spectrum. And I want to know from top to bottom and bottom to top what they think success looks like. I also want to know from left to right what they think success looks like. So across all of the different functions, across all of the different levels of the company. I'm not going to talk to everyone about this, but I'd like to talk to a few people, take a sample, and understand where the fracture points are. If I don't know where the fracture points are, I can't demonstrate progress to those people, because we've all got divergent goals. Ideally, we'd all have the same goals, but at least if I can identify the goals that are misaligned, I can start to talk to those goals and start to demonstrate progress in different areas. So I do recommend doing this top to bottom, left to right exercise if you're struggling with alignment. But what are some of the things that hold us back? Let's talk about some of those problems. Now, some of these may resonate with some of you, some of them may not, some of them you may have already solved. You may be sitting there thinking, well, I've got different problems that he's not talked about today. Obviously, apologize for that. There are obviously a lot of problems, and I could have filled up quite a long presentation with all of them, but I wanted to take just a little flavor of some intrinsic and extrinsic problems that happen to product teams and how they can kind of stymie progress, make us look like we're not doing anything, and some of the things that we might do to overcome some of those challenges. Now, some people might sit there as I talk through the next few minutes and say, oh, here he goes again, just reading stuff out of books or saying things that we've already tried, or they didn't work here, or we're not allowed to do that. And look, I want to call out, there are a bunch of companies out there that have an absolutely appalling set of product practices and really kind of top-down management structures, and feels like in some cases you're never going to get to do anything that they don't want you to do, and that your ideas are never going to get listened to. And it can happen in some cases. I'm also aware of, for example, PMs out there who are complaining about what they don't get to do and how they don't get to do some of these things. But then you speak to their bosses or their CEOs, and they're like, I'd love it if those people did that, but they just never do it. So there's a disconnect. We need to identify that. We need to fix it. I do think it's important for us to try and empower ourselves a little bit, to use another cliched product word, but to empower ourselves and understand that sometimes we can make big successes out of a bunch of small successes. Better is still better than not better. So let's try and do what we can. Problem one, product managers are just so darn helpful. Well, now we sit there and we say, well, there's always too much to do in a startup, and product managers are an incredibly high surface area role. Like, we're sitting there day to day, collaborating with the entire organization. Very few people have the surface area that a product manager does, with the possible exception of the leadership of the company. But of course, they don't have the depth necessarily, the kind of the focus in on the small as well as the focus on the large. Incredibly high surface area. And we also love our products. We want our products to be successful. We want our users to be successful. We want the product to be successful. And many of us are remarkably, incredibly helpful people. We want to do whatever we can to make those products more successful. So because of that, we work on loads of low leverage stuff. We concentrate on the urgent and not the important, and we kind of get bogged down in loads and loads of work that, frankly, probably anyone could do, or certainly other functions could do. Therefore, the high leverage stuff either doesn't get done at all, which obviously then holds you back, or worse, in some cases, someone else does it. And then what happens is the product managers spend a lot of time complaining that they didn't get to do any of the high leverage stuff. Now, I've been in this situation myself in the past. I've sat there complaining that I wasn't doing X, Y, or Z, and that I was being overruled or micromanaged. And at the same time, not really doing anything to try and fix that myself. I was too busy complaining. We need to get out of that loop. So how do we do that? Well, one of the things I like to recommend, and this is an interesting one that might sound a bit kind of counterintuitive, but just don't volunteer. That's not to say that you shouldn't ever help people with anything. We all need to be helpful. But at the same time, we shouldn't be the first people to volunteer. Like, as soon as something comes up, we should be, oh, me. No, let's take a minute, take a breath, and try and work out if there are other teams that can do it. It's not all on us to make the product successful. We're all in this together. Now, also, as product managers, our game is prioritization, right? So we need to work out ways to prioritize what is high leverage versus not. Now, that is going to differ depending on on the company that you're in and some of the things that you have to deal with. But one thing that I like to recommend people that are struggling with this to do is to start to categorize their time, to bucket their time in whatever the buckets are going to be called. So, strategic versus operational versus support versus UAT for some reason, like whatever it is you're doing, categorize your time and work out what it is or where it is that you're spending your time. Lots of people get surprised when they do this. They didn't realize they were spending time in all of these areas to these proportions. But if you realize it, you can start to work out what you want to move. Not saying do timesheets. It could be a finger in the air, but it's definitely worth trying to do some kind of check. Problem 2, the zone of most competence. Beware, you're entering the zone. Now, this is something that resonates with me because I was for many years a developer, close to 20 years. I am super comfortable talking about development with developers. I know development stuff really well, and I love talking about it as well. I'm super interested in it. I love development. And also, I talked earlier about the kind of ambiguity and the difficulty of product management. It's or of startups in general. It's hard out there. And sometimes there are difficult conversations to be had. And some of those difficult conversations could well be outside of our comfort zone, because maybe it's a marketing thing, or maybe it's a business thing, whatever it is. But because things are hard and we're under pressure, we kind of retrench a little bit into our comfort zone. We gravitate to that comfort zone, and we start withdrawing from the other parts, and we start contributing less to the other parts of what make products special. So we miss whole swathes of important work that needs to get done, or in worst case scenario, maybe someone else does it and then we complain about it, like on the previous slide. We also start doing some work that other people can do. For example, me back in the day, going in there quickly helping fix some CSS for some problem, some bug that didn't look right. Oh, I can do that bit. But the more bits you just do, the more stuff can start to fall through the gaps. The more stuff falls through the gaps, the less progress you're going to make. Instead, well, we're going to categorize our time again. Maybe the buckets are going to be different this time, because, you know, we're talking about maybe functional stuff rather than the importance of stuff, or types of work or whatever. But you do need to work out where you're spending your time again, and how much time you're spending in each part of the classic Martin Erickson Venn diagram with the business, UX and tech circles, and, you know, we're there in the middle. Now, it's really easy for the little laser pointer to start to drift away from that middle as soon as things start to get a little tough. So if you notice that drifting, start to aggressively prioritize getting back into the middle and try and push away from some of these other areas that are maybe slightly more comfortable for you, because product management isn't supposed to be comfortable. Our job is to stay as close to that middle as possible and do the best work across the entire part of the product, or the whole kind of landscape of the product, rather than just concentrating on a little bit of it. Problem 3, I have no idea what to work on next. Because we're stuck in the weeds and we're being swamped in competing priorities and there's too much to do, we just don't have any time to think. And because we don't have any time to think, all we do is concentrate on execution and we forget the strategy entirely. Or again, maybe what happens is the strategy gets done by someone else. Therefore, we don't have any vision about, or any strategy or any plan about where we're going. We can't filter any new requests to anything. We have no idea what to prioritize coherently, because all we really have is who's shouting about what stuff. And because we don't have any idea what to prioritize next, we have no evidence to back up any pushing back on random requests. Like if we're sitting there saying, I don't want to, or I don't think we should do this because ... If you've not got anything to put in that ... you're fighting a losing battle. And it's basically going to come down to who's the most persuasive. And let's face it, salespeople, for example, are paid to be persuasive. So you're going to lose that battle. So one thing I like to recommend teams do is the look ahead test. What's the look ahead test? Well, if you're a product manager and you've got a product, how far forward can you look? Can you look forward 3 years? Can you look forward 1 year? Can you look forward 2 weeks? How far can you look forward? And what do you need to know to be able to look further forward? Where's your product going to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Roughly speaking, I'm not asking for like a Gantt chart, but how far can you look? And what do you need to do to know more? And to know that, you do need to carve out time for deep thinking. Like you can't be executing all the time. Lots of PMs are like, oh, if I'm not typing and putting stuff into Jira and moving stuff around on boards, then I'm not working. Very operational mindset. We need to think. We need to make the connections. We need to be able to think and plan further forward and start to have ideas and hypotheses. We can't do that if we don't carve out and block out time for deep thinking. And also by keeping close to our product management 101, keeping close to our customers and our users and our stakeholders gives us things to think about. So we absolutely need to keep doing that and make sure that we're putting our time in the right areas and making those connections. Problem 4, research takes too long. Why do we need that research stuff anyway? Now, we don't, because we're spending all of our time planning and executing and trying to get stuff out on time, and because we have, sales teams and customer success and account manager teams all out there talking to customers every day, like we kind of get a lot of information from them anyway. And actually, maybe they don't even want us talking to customers in the first place because they're very protective. And even if we do get to do any research, we're kind of treating it as a special occasion. We kind of have to get a lot of big run up and then do a big project around research. And because of all of that, what we end up doing is slowing everything down, because whenever we've got some new initiative, basically everything has to wait because we finally got a chance to do some research and we kind of go all big bang into it. Now, what that does is means that people start hating research because stakeholders think we're slowing them down. They kind of think we need to just build this stuff anyway. We just end up getting told we can't do it anymore, or we don't see the value of it. Maybe we didn't get great feedback from the last one. Maybe we didn't validate someone's hypothesis in the way that they thought. And therefore, because it was a one and done, they're not going to let's do that anymore. And we just end up going back to being a feature factory, being told what to build by sales or customer success teams. So instead, you need to embrace your inner Teresa Torres. Now, Continuous Discovery Habits, obviously a book that everyone loves, but it's got a lot to love around this idea that if you make customer interviews not an event and something that just happens, small and continuously, then actually getting feedback from customers is super easy. You're not sitting there having to spin up and do intense work to even get started. You're asking people stuff in the flow of work continuously. But even if you can't do it continuously yourself, at least try and go out for ride-alongs with other customer-facing teams, sales teams, CS teams, and try and get some feedback and at least see things with your own eyes and hear things with your own ears rather than having it all reported back to you. But also, not everything has to be research. Sometimes the best way to test something out is just to build something small and put it out there. Like, you need to assess and size your bets appropriately, but not everything has to be the result of research. So we can validate stuff by building small stuff and getting it out there as well. Problem 5, we're not answering our customers' requests. Well, because we're drowning in customer feedback and we're being asked to do more stuff than we can do, we just have this onslaught of feedback and requests and bug fixes and enhancements and all of that stuff. But because we're a fairly customer success or sales focused company, we don't have any appetite to push back. Maybe we've never pushed back before in our lives, which means that we end up trying to cram every single niche customer request into a sprint. And we're using our some numeric prioritization frameworks to try and score literally everything and trying to then sort it in Excel and promise people that we're going to kind of work through it all one day. Basically means that we're unable to make progress on those big strategic goals that we talked about earlier. And we may end up just sticking band-aids on stuff just to get stuff out there and kind of get the noise down. Or worse still, we just leave people dangling with this, one day soon, next sprint, never gets done, but people are complaining about it all the time. So we end up wasting time managing that whole situation when we don't need to. So instead, don't prioritize everything. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't prioritize anything, but you don't need to prioritize it. It's a complete waste of time. For example, estimating effort on something that you don't even think you're going to work on. You're burning developer time on stuff that may never even get considered. You also need to work with the CS team to agree on a robust decision tree. So you need to set a really high bar for things that are going to get even considered. That doesn't mean that we hate our customers or that we don't want to do stuff for them, but we want to do the most important stuff for them. And if there is this appetite to work on some stuff, just put a percentage on it. Make sure that you're carving out enough time to do some of that stuff, but don't spend all of your time firefighting and doing that stuff and not making any progress on your strategic goals. And also, it's important to say, it's a cliche, but it's important to say no, not maybe. I want a no or a yes. I don't want a maybe. I don't want a hanging anything. It's not no progress to not build something. It's no progress to not decide to not build something. Problem number 6, product development has gotten really, really, really slow. Now, as product teams scale, we all see these additional processes and procedures building up. And of course, if we're in a particularly risk-averse company, maybe we want to just be really sure before we build stuff. But also at the same time, because of these pesky customers, we're squeezing loads of bits and bobs and low-hanging fruit and quick wins and all of that stuff into our development cycles, which means that we don't get started on new initiatives quickly enough because we're trying to load everything up and we're trying to do too much validation before we get started. But also because we keep cramming stuff into the sprints and stuffing them with an inch of their lives, we're not even really delivering anything of value sprint on sprint if we're even doing Scrum. And if we're doing releases, they keep getting pushed back because that last thing that we added in ended up being more complicated. It's all tied up in one complicated ball of rubber bands, and now we can't make any progress. Which means that ideas, we struggle to get them, turn them into reality. Customers don't get any benefit at all, and leadership get more and more likely to try to intervene and swoop in and try and make us do stuff somehow quicker because that's how they remember it back in the old days. So instead, we need to live the agile dream, work small, release often, and make sure that whenever you put new stuff on the plate, something else has to fall off. There's none of this magical thinking, piling stuff up high. The more stuff we pile up high, the more we just add in, the more low-hanging fruit and quick wins and they all add up and they all basically become inventory. which is, if you've ever worked in a shop, shops don't like inventory. You want to have as little in the warehouse as possible. It all just adds up to cost. You need to prioritize flow. It's much easier to put one marble at a time through a funnel than pour a whole load of marbles into a funnel and then put more marbles on the top whilst the marbles are still struggling to get through. You have to work small. Problem 7, we are drowning in tech debt. Well, we've been building for so long and so fast, and we've not been tidying up ourselves. We made some historic choices that we never corrected or never went back. And hilariously, because we've been trying to demonstrate forward progress and keep going forward, we've actually stretched our supply lines and we've started to slow down again because we're spending all of our time firefighting. We're suffering from downtime and slowness and system events and just general instability. And ultimately, we're getting more and more complaints from customers. Leadership are getting complaining more and more because the customers are complaining to them or the customers' bosses are complaining to them. We also end up with the horror of shadow roadmaps. So this whole idea of like, you've got the engineering team now have been tasked to create an entirely different roadmap of fixing tech debt, but it's the same people. So we're just clashing with each other all the time. So what we need to do to try and fix that? Well, we need to collaborate. I don't want any shadow roadmaps. We should collaborate with tech leadership, work as a team. Fixing tech debt is a first-class problem that we have to solve as part of a product prioritization initiative. But to do that, we need to frame the business value of the tech debt, not just technical terms and, oh, this database is worse than that database. We need to frame it in risk and value and benefit terms that resonate with our non-technical stakeholders. And also we need to challenge our engineers to fix tech debt incrementally, rather than just trying to do it all in one big bang or 18 months of replatforming. It all looks the same afterwards, and try and release customer value as we go. Right, nearly there, demonstrating progress. Well, how do we demonstrate then? If we do any of those things, how do we demonstrate that to the rest of the company? Well, we've got to start storytelling. So it's important to appropriately engage our stakeholders. If we don't talk to them enough, then their assumptions are going to fill all empty space and they're going to get stuff wrong and they're going to think that we said things that we didn't. If we speak to them too much, then no one's going to get any work done. So there's a seesaw. We need to balance out how much communication is appropriate. But whatever communication level we do have to make sure that we're speaking a language. No product terms, definitely no technical terms. It's important to say things and adjust what you're saying to the audience that you're saying it to, because otherwise they're not going to understand. They'll pretend they understand probably because they don't want to think that you think that they're dumb. But you do need to talk to them in language that resonates with them. And we do have to remember, it's a cliche, but you need to repeat yourself and repeat yourself and repeat yourself. And the more you repeat yourself, you'll get bored, but then keep repeating yourself. People aren't always listening. It's important for them to get the message. And finally, the idea of, well, we need to get out there in front of these people. We need to get out in front of people and say to them, this is what we're doing. So I love a show and tell. I advocate for it every couple of weeks, every 4 weeks. This idea that the product team get in front of the entire organization. It's not a sprint retro. It's not just focused on delivery. It's focused a bit on delivery, what's come, but it's also focused on what's coming, why it's coming, decisions that have been taken. It includes customer feedback. It includes maybe videos that you've taken of people using the product. It includes information from analytics. It includes everything that you've done. And it includes them in business-friendly terms, again, that resonate with the audience that you're taking it out to. No tech terms, no product terms, talking business and user value terms. You can also invite guest speakers that have collaborated with the product team to come in and co-present with you, give stories in a slightly different light, and make sure that you just give fulsome praise and credit and shout outs to every single person you've worked with, every single person within and without the product team that you've contributed with, to make everyone feel involved and a stakeholder in the success and the progress and the forward movement that you're creating. And that is me, I think, with a minute to spare. So obviously, thank you very much for listening to my rambles. I hope some of it was half useful. And obviously, I'm really happy to connect with people after this, and also happy to answer any questions in the Slack or wherever else.